Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Rachel Wilson, and I'm from the Orange County Youth Bureau.
Hi, I'm Sonia Tate. I'm the Youth Development Coordinator for the Office of Children and Family Services.
So we are going to co-present together what the Office of Children and Family Services is looking for in the applications that youth bureaus submit onto the QUIDS, Quality Youth Development System, as well as what the programs that apply for funding from youth bureaus fill out on their applications for funding. We wanted to take the time to be intentional, to have a conversation about the 8 features of positive youth development. A few years ago, I think it was 2012, so 5 years ago, many youth bureaus were a part of a training that the Office of Children and Family Services hosted, where we looked at each feature. We tried out different training techniques for how we could go back to our counties and train service providers how to better incorporate 8 features. But 5 years have gone by, and there's been a lot of staff turnover, and there has not really been a lot of emphasis back on the 8 features other than, is it correct on the QUIDS, Quality Youth Development System, that youth bureaus enter? And so we really felt as a team, for both the Office of Children and Family Services and the Youth Bureau Association, that it's always good, especially when 5 years have passed, to just take a moment and let's have the conversation. Who has actually absorbed the 8 features in their practice? Who really never looked at it after the 5 years? You know, that they went to a training, it went on a shelf, and that was it. Wherever you're at today, that's fine, because we hope that everybody will take it one step further. And I can say personally, in our county, I have all new staff. I'm the only one that has been there for more than 3 years, and I've been there for 15. But we went through the training, my staff was trained, and then my staff left. And so this is a great opportunity for me to even stop and be refreshed on what I was trained on 5 years ago, to really make sure that we're dotting our I's, crossing our T's, but more importantly, that the programs that we're funding really even understand what these 8 features are, and are they really incorporating them in their programs.
How many of you are new to the Youth Bureau system? See? That's why we have to have this training.
So at this time, we'd like to just go around the room and do intros, and we'd like to hear who you are, where you're from. If you're from a youth bureau, what it is, but if you're from a different organization, we'd like to hear where that is as well. And you're all here for some reason, so if there's one thing that you're really hoping to get from today's presentation, we'd like to capture that. Or if there's an obstacle that you feel you've hit with the 8 features, we'd like to capture that. And the preface is we may not address it today. We only have a little bit of time. We have about 4 minutes per feature, because there's 8 features. But what we'd like to do is then take your comments and see if we can incorporate into the monthly calls that we have with the Office of Children and Family Services, or perhaps generate a webinar that may go into some of your questions in more detail. And in May, when we have our Youth Bureau Directors training, we'd like to revisit that. And you're fortunate because Rebecca and I are both the co-facilitators, the co-training folks, so we will come back to our planning committee and take a look at what we can incorporate as well. Anything you want to add?
So I think, like Rachel mentioned, but it was about 5 years ago when we first rolled out this training. So, you know, Crystal and I, Crystal Jones, she's no longer with us, but, you know, we was looking at the 8 features, and, you know, when we look at the program application, when we got to the 8 features portion of it, we saw that a lot of the responses weren't that great, or they weren't really addressing the 8 features. So we felt that this is a great opportunity for us to have this training right now. When I'm looking at the program application and I'm looking at the program summary, I mean, I'm looking for, you know, you succinctly state what the program is offering. I mean, I get a lot of applications, a lot of summaries that are all over the place. And I'm trying to figure out what program that this program is offering to the youth. So, you know, when you go back and you look at your program applications, please make sure that they succinctly state what they'll be offering. I mean, I know you have 100 words, but, you know, Sometimes I get like, well, programs is from 9 to 5 on Saturday and Sunday. I need to know what you will be doing with those kids for that time period.
So Sonia you just referred to the program summary. And we didn't give an example of a program summary because there's such a range of types of programs. But basically, the program summary, whoever's applying for funding should be able to say, if you give us this funding, this is a snapshot of what we're able to do. They can't cover everything. It can't be paragraphs long. But this should be what you can then turn around and say to your legislators, this is what the funding's going for, this kind of program. Or if you're talking to somebody on the board and they're going to monitor a program, this is the program you're going to see. It should be a pretty good snapshot. The next portion is monitoring and evaluation. And those are two words I don't know about in your communities, but I know applications that I see, they use the words interchangeably. And they're two different things. And we're not focusing a lot on that today, but that is something that we could go back to at another point. But monitoring, what I wanted to point out, because this, to be honest, stood out to me for the first time preparing for this. I always refer to monitoring as what you do along the way of your program to make sure you're on track. But some key words that stood out to me was this is also speaking to what you're in contract for. Are you in contract compliance? Are you following what you said you would do with the contract that you signed with your funder? And so that gave me another lens that I'm going to relook at some of our monitoring to make sure that that piece is captured. And you'll see in red, this is an example of what we do with our funding applications. We've taken what the Office of Children and Family Services wants, and we highlighted in red for our applicants so they know the checklist of what we look for when we are reviewing their applications. So describe your process that you're going to use to monitor on a regular basis. So here's your checklist. Who is responsible to monitor? What's the frequency? How often will it be checked in on? And what documentation will you be able to provide? Then if you look over at evaluation, that's more at the end of the program time. Was it successful? Did the youth reach the outcomes that your program was intended for them to meet? And it's looking at the value and the amount of success that the program has had. And again, in red, some of the examples that we give is describe the process that you use to reach those goals, to reach the objectives, to reach the outcomes. Those are all words that go interchangeably when you look at different grants. So here's your checklist. What is going to be measured? Is it your grades? Is it attendance? Is it learning a specific skill? Who is going to conduct the evaluation? When will it be conducted? And how will the results be used? This is an area that we find often gets left off. What good is an evaluation if nothing happens with it once it's compiled or looked at? Or if it's just a feedback form to your participants and nobody looks at it afterwards. So it's important to also say how you will use those results. So now the title of the workshop is unpacking the application and looking more at the 8 features of positive youth development. So that's what we're ready to do now. Again, this is not going to be just a lecture style. We're hoping to hear from you. Anything that stands out of, oh yeah, I have a program and this is how their feature is really explaining it to us well. That's really what we're focusing on today, is how well we explain how the 8 features of positive youth development are being addressed. So you can actually use the list that we are going to show you. It can actually be some of the wording that goes into your applications as long as it's the appropriate fit for that program.
Just back up a little bit. I just want to make sure I'm not missing something. Under evaluation, it says 6 questions, but there are 5. I just didn't know if there's one
There are 6. I had to go through it. The way they have this in, they have 2 questions in one.
Oh, okay.
And
Whether it's effective or not effective, is that?
and why is this the case? And in general, is it effective? And in particular, is it, so there were two kind of worded into one
Okay, thank you.
from the original source. Thank you, though. Thank you for reading it.
So I also want to add that these 8 features serve as quality standards for youth development programs.
So if you want a good quality youth program, these will be examples of what you should find. So physical and psychological safety. Physical safety is pretty easy to see. You monitor a program, you look around, is the environment safe from dangerous things? Like I had to push this wire out from under my feet, push it under the table so I don't trip. Are the fire extinguishers marked? Are the lights for the exits well lit? Is it too hot? Is it too cold? Is it fresh air? Are there other obstacles, broken glass or garbage or other things that would make it dangerous physically for a youth? The part that sometimes is a little harder to see can be the psychological safety. But hopefully when you look through the positive youth development lens, you start picking up on the cues. So we want to make sure if youth are together, are they using kind language with one another? Are they respectful to one another? Are they making fun? Is somebody being silenced out of the group? So there are a lot of psychological factors as well. And so just giving, I gave some examples for physical, is your building in a safe environment? And perhaps you can't control where your building is located, but do you have good lights outside so that youth feel safe when they're showing up? Are there signs that show how to get to your program? And then looking at the psychological aspects, really wanting to know, the feedback from them. Do they feel comfortable and welcome and safe emotionally and psychologically?
Also, physical and psychological safety is the fundamental to attract young people to programs to keep them coming back. So this is the prerequisite to the 8 features.
Because why would you want to come back somewhere if you don't feel accepted and safe? So that's a goal. So your other handout, this is how it will coincide with this feature. You have descriptors for physical and psychological safety, which is pretty much the same wording, safe and health promoting facilities. Sometimes it's easier to look at the opposite of what you want. And so if you look on the very bottom, it gives you opposite poles. For example, physical and health dangers, fear, feeling of insecurity, sexual and physical harassment, and verbal abuse. That's what you don't want to see at a program. So then when you're looking at your applications, whether you're someone who's applying for funding and you want to demonstrate how well you do this, or if you're someone who's allocating the funding and you're reviewing applications, the second column tells you, here's a strong example of what you would expect an applicant to fill in. And the last column is a weak example. Now, my quick response is, well, the weak one is only 1 or 2 sentences. But it's also the content of those sentences as well. We don't want this filled with, it's not because there's a lot of words that it makes it strong. It's because they really hit on what they're doing to make their program safe physically and psychologically. So Sonia actually gave entries for this based on what youth bureaus have submitted into quiz. So we were able to look at some of those strong responses across the state and some areas that we can go back now and revisit with our programs. Did you want to add anything for this?
You got to be mindful when you submitting your applications, for a review, that you guys are signing off on this. So you got to, look at your applications and make sure that, they're addressing the 8 features, they're addressing, other parts of the program application.
Are there any questions or comments about physical and psychological safety? So again, the purpose of this workshop is just taking a little time to intentionally look at each one. So let's move on to appropriate structure. There are a couple 8 of the features that sometimes it sounds like you're talking about one or it could be the other, and there is a little bit of overlap between them. So even for appropriate structure, clear and consistent rules, you want to make sure that the youth and the participants in your program understand what the rules are and what's expected of them. We've talked about having our staff understand what the 8 features are. It's just as important that your staff understand what the rules are in the program. Having youth positively assess the program, giving their criticism and their positive comments is very helpful too. You want to make sure that everything is set up in a way that is fitting their needs as well.
Also, going back to the rules part, you want to make sure that the rules apply to everyone. That is not one set of rules for this set of kids and one set of rules for this set of kids. You want to have uniformity in terms of your rules.
So some comments that we got that maybe weren't the best by themselves. You know, spaces are free of inappropriate or degrading materials. That's a good thing to have, but that's pretty much all they put. That is not enough, just to make sure that your environment has friendly language on posters. That's one piece of the puzzle. It's also helpful to know, if you want to know the structure, what's happening during the program. What activities are we doing? You know, having an agenda, or knowing, you know, depending on what type of program that you're doing, what's happening from one time to the end, and then if they transition to another component, what will be happening there, so that they understand. Supportive relationships. This takes up 2 slides, so I'll start on the first slide. Supportive relationships is really, on a regular basis, you're working with the staff of your programs, you're working with your volunteers, and you're working with your participants in your program so that they can connect with one another. So what are you doing in your program through activities or through communication or through training to make sure that there's good communication happening between staff and between staff and the participants in your program, as well as participants' family members? How are you bringing them in as well? It's a relationship where the whole family needs to be engaged. So one of the examples they give, they leave lines. So I like this one. We promote friendships among participants by. So the by with a line, that tells you need to add something to it. And sometimes on the applications, they'll say, well, we promote friendships, or we make sure everybody gets along. But they don't do the by part. How do you do it? So that's what takes it from being a weak example of, I'm going to rephrase the question with the same words in the question, and I've answered it. You haven't answered it. How do you can do that to start your answer, but we need more details. How exactly will you do this? We're going to help build friendships by having a circle time where youth are sharing with each other what they did over the weekend. By having buddy system where they can be matched up with somebody and they can have a few minutes before each program to just connect with one another. So there's different examples, but we need to hear more details on how that actually is happening.
So have anyone else seen that in one of your programs that you have monitored or visited?
Anybody have a good example of how their program provides a supportive relationship for the youth that they work with?
I have one of my programs, they do the circles, and with the talking stick, and give the youth a chance to speak where they are, and it's a safe environment for them to do that.
So using an example like the circle, and you pass the talking stick, so nobody's talking over each other, they're respecting each other. They get to be heard and they get to listen to others. It's a good example. Anybody here fund a mentoring program? So we know examples of what a supportive relationship is supposed to look like, and hopefully our programs are wording that in a way that it really demonstrates, you know, training their mentors, having case managers that work with the families to make sure that it's a successful match, working with the youth and making sure they feel connected to their mentor.
Things we've done in our employment program, they're not allowed to use their cell phones all day. So
So in an employment program, taking away the cell phones and actually making them talk to one another. And they actually want to talk to one another because by that point, they've had a lot of things to say that they couldn't get out over the phone. That's a good example. Sometimes we have to modify the situation, the environment a little bit. So opportunities to belong. This can be a challenge for some programs, depending on resources. I know in our county, it's something we wish we had more of. But having at least one staff and or volunteer who can speak a language other than English, depending on who your participants are. And so if you are able to have some of your staff and volunteers reflect the youth that you're working with or the families that you're working with, that will help them feel more connected whenever possible. Having your staff and your volunteers be culturally competent in understanding that the participants they work with may come from a different background and journey than what they bring to the table as staff and volunteers. And there's no good or bad, it's just different. And so just kind of saying what you as a participant bring to the program will look differently than the journey I've walked. And so how do I understand yours? Not how do I get you to change to fit my program, but how do I understand what you're bringing to the table? And then if there are behaviors that do need to change, you know, we don't smack somebody when we don't like what they say. And in your culture, that might have been what you've done with your peers or in your family, but here in this setting, we're going to try this so that everybody feels safe. So it's really meeting people where they're at and helping them feel like they are a part of what the program. And one example could just simply be if you are part of a group, you all have the same t-shirt because that's your brand, or you're on a team, or you're part of a Boys and Girls Club or a YMCA, or fill in another program name. This is your part of your identity. We're part of this together. So that can look in different ways. So
That inclusiveness that you must bring to this particular setting right here.
yes, inclusiveness is a key word. And so does anybody have examples of programs that they feel have done a good job showing how to help youth belong, or on that polar piece of kind of wish it didn't look the way it does?
Various activities around Black History Month, Cinco de Mayo in May, some of the various celebrations, like in September, there's a celebration for
Hispanic Heritage,
Spanish, yes.
Hispanic Heritage Month.
So they'll have different activities, they'll do craft activities, or we'll do food. And then that way, you know, and then we have families involved in that as well. So there's different ways that you can do it. On your calendar, it tells you, you know,
Right.
What the
So
holidays
some
are?
diversity. Yeah.
exactly. So you get your ideas that way. A lot of our staff use Pinterest.
Okay.
They pull down Pinterest right on their phones.
I love it.
And then they will put in a needs and a wants, a wish list of what, you know, I want to do this activity, and we'll order whatever they need for their activity. And then go forward.
So really being aware, and I'll come to you in 1 second, being aware of what the cultural richness is that the participants are bringing into the program and saying, why don't we celebrate that a little bit? And
At one of my sites, we have people who work the farms, because we're rural. And sometimes the parents are non-English speaking, so we have Spanish applications in the language, so that they can fill it out, and then we have someone interpret for us, or switch it back over to English so that we can read.
nice. So again, it's just being intentional. Who is it you're working with, and how do you help them feel like they're a part of this program? Because then they'll want to stay. So it's worth putting the investment in.
I was a program director before I got into this realm. So what I would do is upon registration, like all my applicants, which would be roughly between 90 and 125 kids per year, what I would do is sit down with my staff, go through applications, like if someone has essential autism, if someone has, you know, any particular cultural background or disability or anything that stands out, we would go through each month and choose like at least 3 topics over the course of the month that we would address to the children
And by doing it across the board, you're not singling anything out,
Right.
which is
or
good too.
making anyone feel, any type of way. So that worked out.
And I think it's important because we don't want to do a disservice either to those who we work with. There are unspoken rules everywhere we go.
And they learn.
And we want them to know how to pick up on those unspoken rules when they're going into a workplace. If you're working with teens, I'm sorry, what?
Generationally as well.
Yes.
Yes, yeah. Coworker here just mentioned about looking in the eyes. My mom taught me to look you in your face, because my facial expression as a young kid would tell you if I understood what you were saying.
Yeah.
And I happened to come into a room with a teacher who was past retirement age and from a different generation, that when I looked at her, she considered me defiant.
Oh.
And couldn't explain and that year was a year from hell. Because everything I did was a problem for her. And then the looking in the eyes, and my mom taught me that was respect. I was giving you my full attention. I was, exactly. And so it's not always a race thing,
No.
a sexual orientation thing. Sometimes you just have somebody in the job that grew up at a time where kids are to be, to be seen and not heard. So I think sometimes that can be an issue too.
There's so many different dynamics that come into play, and so it's a matter of trying to stay on top of it the best we can with what the varieties of different issues or concerns are, so we can better equip our staff, our volunteers, and our youth. Good. Anything else for this one?
One of the things we tried this year in our spring workforce training program, the young people who were participants were served as ambassadors, and they would set up tables at the lunchroom and recruit young people to come to the summer program. Our ambassadors were paid for the young people to put them down as a reference. And again, but it gave them a chance to say, I'm currently in the TeenWorks program, ask me about it, here's what it's like. So again, it was a sense of belonging. It was also efficacy and mattering, which we're going to do soon, because they had a voice in how they talked about the program to their peers. And the young people saw them as role models rather than an adult coming in and saying, this is a good use of your time.
Yeah, so definitely using one another, mentoring each other, bringing us through examples how to do it. Thank you. So let's move on to our next one. Positive social norms. Am I good? Am I on track? Positive social norm. So I mentioned earlier that sometimes you'll see an overlap between the features. So the first one is clear and consistent rules of conduct have been developed. If you looked back at appropriate structure, the first one is clear and consistent rules of conduct have been developed. So sometimes there is an overlap. Some of the examples can carry over, because in order to belong to something, to know what the norms are in a program, you need to know what the rules are. And so that's something that the clearer that it can be, the better, whether it's something in writing and or verbally given and or modeled through behavior, and really a combination of all of those. So when you're looking at the positive social norms, examples of a weak response could be participants will learn how to make healthy and exercise choices. That by itself is what makes it weak. That combined with some other examples, if this is an obesity prevention program or a wellness program, what are some other norms? What will that look like? So, youth will be taught how to increase their exercise by so many minutes a day, or we will practice making healthy recipes and exploring where they come from. So there's different examples that can be added to that, but also with, what are the expectations? If you're coming into the program and it's snack time, do you sit down with your cheese doodles and your ring dings and Snickers bars, or will your program say that's not what we do here? Here it's going to be, apples, we're going to try some kale smoothies and, eat Snickers on the side before you get there. Not endorsing Snickers, but, really what do you expect when you come to this program? What are our norms here? So does anybody have any examples that they want to share of some programs?
No outside food.
No outside food?
No outside food, but there were opportunities that were afforded. I was actually able to have the University of Buffalo had students who were doing service learning. So once a month they would come in, they would bring healthy snacks, they would bring things like hummus, like popcorn with like no sauce or butter, guacamole, things that most urban children wouldn't naturally have. Or maybe a few of them have been exposed to it, but they just didn't have the combination of, guacamole with the chip as opposed to on the taco, so things like that. But no outside food for plenty of reasons, due to allergies first and foremost. And then just so it's uniform at snack time, when we do have snack time, that everybody has the same exact thing, no fighting, no arguing, just easier.
So creating the social norm in your program around food. I just picked food. I'm sorry, that was the norm I picked. Setting it up so that everybody's on the same page. When they know that when they're in this program, you will actually get to eat. My father was one of 8 kids. As an adult, he still ate super fast because if you didn't get it, you didn't get it. And unfortunately, that's some of the kids that we work with. So to come to a program and know you don't have to rush up and grab 5 servings. We're all getting 1 serving now, and then we'll take turns and get another one. There's plenty for all of you. Understanding that and kind of introducing that of what's anything
And back
else?
to the food piece, we know that some of the kids come to the programs and they haven't eaten anything. So you have one kid that comes in with the food and it's like, oh my God, can I have some of that, please? So it's good that that you guys do not allow any outside food. Yes.
Unless you bring enough for everybody to share. But like you said, with food allergies and other things, it's a challenge. Support for efficacy and mattering. I personally always hear those words, I'm like, efficacy and mattering? What are we doing with efficacy and mattering? Really what this is it's helping those that are in your program to have an identity of who they are in the program. That they can make a difference, that they have a voice in how your program is set up, that they can give feedback for what can be changed to make it more inclusive, how they can serve on an advisory role. So it's really what can you do with your program that takes the youth where they're at and gives them the skills and the support to become stronger leaders within that program, either with one another as peers or even taking more leadership role within your program and for some within your organization. So how do you not do that? Looking at the opposites piece, you don't want your program to be so simplistic that you're not challenging them to learn new skills. Over-controlling. I'm the staff, you're the child, you do what I say, don't think or give any input, is not what we're looking for. It's, I'm the staff, you're the participant, let's work together to make this the best program it can be. What are you interested in? What are things that we can try? And hearing from the youth and actually helping them to practice. Try some, you want to do a fundraiser? Let's try this fundraiser. And maybe this event, and maybe it didn't come out the way they thought it would. And they failed. And that's okay because you worked with them and then they failed at an event and we said, well, how come this event failed? Well, we picked a car wash and the date we picked was February 3rd in the middle of winter. Okay, well, so what do you think? Well, maybe we should pick a different time of year next time. And let's have a rain date or a snow date. So let them make mistakes and learn, build those skills, but do it with a way that you're providing the support and sharing input, but letting them figure some things out for themselves as well. So one example of a weak response, youth instructors are given a chance to grow and experience, I should say, employment in the workforce and set a positive example for our youth. Youth are asked to do the appropriate behavior to enable a successful summer. Does anybody have ideas on how that could maybe be reworded a little bit to be a stronger example, or what could be added to that? Again, the youth instructors are given a chance to grow and experience employment in the workforce and set a positive example for our youth. Youth are asked to do the appropriate behavior to enable a successful summer. What does that mean? What is appropriate behavior?
Yeah, I think details are needed on what exactly, give some examples of how that's played out.
Does anybody have a suggestion on anybody that says workforce readiness or career readiness or jobs? What kind of behavior would be appropriate behavior in the workplace?
Timeliness, attitude, the way you dress, all of those soft skills.
So youth will be helped to understand how to express themselves with appropriate dress for their workplace, whether it's jeans or dress shirt and dress pants. They will know how to go to work on time. We will go over time management. We will go over communication. If you can't make it into your job, who do you let know? Just texting your supervisor, sorry, I can't come, and you're supposed to be there in 5 minutes, that doesn't count as notifying your supervisor that you're not coming into work that day. So giving some more details on what exactly that would look like.
This summer, we worked with a couple of youth at the regional office. And, you know, some of them were coming, they weren't dressed appropriately. They did get there on time. And, you know, when they had an appointment or something, they did not call or send an email or anything. They'll say, oh, I thought you knew that I was not going to be in. It was, how did we know we didn't receive anything from you? So definitely had that conversation with them on a few occasions.
Opportunities for skill building. This one I like because it has a lot of lines. If you're looking at the one with the slides, and it goes back to the what, how, give us more details. So when you're helping those in your program to learn physical, intellectual, psychological, emotional, and social skills, what are you going to do? How are you going to help them build those skills? And so with the slide, it shows you young people learn or improve the following physical skills. Then you would give some examples. So your wording in your application can say that, but then what are examples of those skills? Maybe it's a soccer program or a swim program. So for example, youth will be able to swim 20 laps within a certain period of time. Or youth will be able to do 30 jumping jacks. Or youth will learn how to tie their shoes. Or youth will learn how to play soccer. So different skills that are physical.
To add to that, you know, to dribble a basketball or to shoot a basketball, to know how to learn different plays when it comes down to team building.
Social skills. Can you give an example, anybody, of some social skills that you would help youth improve on? Sharing, making friendships. Interactions with other youth, respect, speaking. Good. Young people learn or improve the following pre-employment or job skills. Some examples of what that might look like.
How to interview,
How to interview.
how to compose a resume.
Resume writing. How to find a job. How to keep a job. Young people learn or improve the following creative skills. So this is where your arts programs, your music programs, things that help the youth think outside of that box. But even if it's a homework program, what can they do within a homework help program to be creative? Oh, if I use highlighters, I can organize a little bit more with some of my notes. Or if I get Post-it notes and you teach them how to do that, you teaching them how to think in different ways. Academics are improved by, oops, I gave homework help as my example, but academics are improved by homework.
We call ours Homework Harbor.
Homework Harbor, where you work on the assignments, getting them done. Or how do you use your library? Or how do you research online to find information for what you're working on in school? Our last feature. For some programs, this is the hardest one. It's the integration of family, school, and community efforts. Some programs are excellent with their youth participants. But once you leave the youth aspects, it could be much harder with some other aspects. It's not saying it's a bad program. There may be a lot of challenges that are in place that you have to overcome, but actually engaging the family in what's happening in your program, working with the schools. Some have it set up where, yeah, we get copies of the report cards of the kids in our program, so we can celebrate if they've gone up a point. And so some have good examples of how they're doing that. Some work with the schools to see where the school has identified a gap. Maybe it's the literacy rate for a certain grade, or maybe it's trying to get the families to come out to a PTA event. And you might say, well, maybe they don't feel comfortable coming to the school. But if you come to our after-school program, we've got parents that are there. Maybe you should come to us, and you can have a way where you can share your information in a setting where they're more comfortable. And the same thing with community. What's going on in your community? Are there events happening that you can help your participants go to, or help them plan events that they can then put on for the community? And really letting the community know what you're doing and how well you're doing it, so they can help make referrals into your programs. Are there any other examples that anybody has or struggles about integrating?
Example, we did family fun night, which was normally weekend. So in the beginning of the school year, we would plan out the third Thursday of every month from 5 to 7, whether your kids went after school or not. The charter school that we were housing was amazing with helping with promotion. So we would do anything from a skating party in the gym, anything from movie night, $5 for the entire family, including pizza and popcorn, because local businesses would actually help donate the food or whatever the case may be. But that was something that the kids looked forward to. A lot of the working parents, that worked out for them, because you knew if no other night of the month, you knew 6 months in advance, family fun nights coming. This is the one night from 5 to 7 where 4 of your children probably attend the school. They just stay after. You don't worry about transportation. You show up, we do whatever that activity is, and we allow like community vendors to come in, whether it be for like blood donation, whether it be for banking, things like that. So there was always like a parental component to it, but it was mainly led by like the youth, and everybody in the community was involved.
So in addition to having events, the important part that I'm hearing is it's the communication that you're having those events, letting others know that you're having them, letting others know when you're having them, so that they have the opportunity to come and take advantage of that.
Right, and if they were all themed, so for each month, whatever the theme was, so if it was health for this month, then of course it would be like a Blue Cross Blue Shield, Unix type of thing. If it was like wealth and management, then we would have a bank come in, and not only would they do like a penny saver type workshop, 15-20 minutes with the kids, teaching them how to save their allowance or how to build up their money. Mine may give a mortgage workshop or something like that. So it was 2 separate events within one. So the kids get a component, the parents get a component, then the ending component will be all together.
Nice. So sometimes it's breaking them up by youth and
Yes.
family sections, and then bringing them back together. Nice. Any other examples?
It's not an example, but there are 2 things I add when I go around to visit the sites that I find. There are 2 questions I always ask for their understanding of diversity, what that means to them, and what their understanding of family is.
Yeah.
To make sure there's a sensitivity to the various forms of families that are out there, to make sure that no one is being left out because of terminology. So that's key for me to make sure that that's happening with programs.
Yeah, with any message that you want to give, you need to give it in a way that the people you want to give it to want to receive it. So you have to speak their language, cater it in a way that will be well received.
It's like, it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Are there any other questions or comments? So I would like to thank you on behalf of the Association of New York State Youth Bureaus for taking the time out of a packed conference to still pause and just say, what can I do differently when I go back? So hopefully we've given you the tools that you can use to, take a glance at the applications that you receive. I know I'm going back and looking at ours and really saying, where can we take this one step better? Or 3 steps better. Yeah, we'll make this available electronically. It'll be put on the association's website.
So, like Rachel said, the 2018 RFP process and allocations will be sent out soon. So I know that you guys will be funding, some of the programs. So take the time out to look at the 8 features in your program applications, please.
And I did bring cards, so if anybody wants, or if you look on the front here, is my email address. If you'd like the handouts faster than we put them on the website, just send me an email and ask for
I
it.
actually want to practice this with my board because I have youth and adults on my board. I want to make sure we have those 8 elements in place with our young people that sit on our board. Are we hitting everything? Right.
I found either being a new youth bureau director for those that are new, or all staff turnover like I've had, Tony's had, it's a great opportunity to pause, reflect, and refresh what we're doing. And so I trained my board members while I was training my staff how to use the program quality assessment tool. Had to train my staff anyway, so why not open it up, and then I had my board come. And even if they're not using those tools, it gives them a better awareness of what my staff is looking for when they go out to monitor. So there's a better trust in the process, which then ties into, if we're funding programs, have we monitored them? If we monitored them, what did we look at? And so it's a great tool just to help everybody be on the same page.
Also for the YPQA, it's online. So if anyone's interested in taking it, just send me an email and I can get you registered to take that particular online training.
It's very easy. I went through it to prepare for for the board. So thank you all for your time. If you have individual questions, feel free to come on up. They were given out at the registration table, so if you can just fill them out, they get handed in at the end.
This was really good. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to fit in, so I found a gang.
My parents were always too busy, so I learned that I had to take care of myself.
So I sell drugs. So what?
I wanted to spend Christmas with my family this year. Guess that's not gonna happen.